What's up everybody, this is me Athira Pushpamgathan and you're watching The Crazy Mess. Today I am going to defend my project and it's one of my biggest achievements because in my bachelor's and my master's of arts I couldn't do it because first I was in Bangalore, second I was stuck with Corona, so this is my third degree which is my master's of education. So I'm going to defend my project and I'm going to take you guys with me, so let's go. To be very honest, I don't have time. It's 10:15 and I am vacating. If you guys watched the last vlog, you guys know that I'm vacating, so this is just the video I took after that. So I cleaned everything yesterday and now I have to get ready and get changed, take whatever is left in this apartment, put it in the car, go to uni, get the printout of the project, maybe tell Prisha to walk because I don't know if I can pick her up, but let's see. Yeah, and let's do it. I'm not gonna take the getting ready video like makeup and stuff. It's too much of energy and I really don't have it today, but yes, even today I think I need your guys' hug, so let's hug and move forward. Too tired. I got ready, but I had to take all the things into my car. It was 2-3 trips and luckily the new flat owners helped us, but like it's the outfit with some waist. Finished all the things for the moving. Now I'm going to get my project printed out, then I'll meet Prisha, then I'll just revise and get this done. But yeah, I look nice. You guys know me, I will look nice. Okay, let's go. So baby is here. Oh, the lighting is this side. Baby is here to support me. Yes, we are gonna go revise, drink some water and do the defending. She's just too tired. I've been torturing her. I tortured this girl for like 4 months. So yeah, but how our hair looks similar. Yeah, it shines. Okay, let's go.
Land and allows you that we are situated on the ancient traditional territory of the TheCrazyMess. Also acknowledge that learning has happened on these lands for millennials, and we have to keep that at the center of our work and our research, etc. I'm sure you've got your own land acknowledgement in a way, so it will come up. Just the housekeeping, Athira's going to do a presentation about 20-25 minutes. It's very informal. I'm not going to time you, but try and stick to that. And then we'll have still 2 rounds of questions, as myself and another second reader. But again, it's not tricky questions. It's just to get you to showcase your reflection. And then if we have time, I'm sure we'll have time. We'll take a few questions from the audience as well as that. And then we'll wrap up your question presentation.
Thank you so much.
And welcome for it. Enjoy it. It's it's a lot of hard work and ends very quickly. So this is your moment to shine and enjoy it.
So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming here today to attend my defending. So, as already Frederick have mentioned, the land acknowledgement, the campuses of Thomson Rivers Universities are located in the Tekramdu Shreevidya territory with the unceded traditional lands of Shreevidya Nation. I recognize that this place give me an opportunity to share my knowledge and help me learn, teach and do research in this wonderful land. So I acknowledge the land with all my heart. So to introduce my topic is exploring the impact of cross-cultural education on communication competency and auto-narrative inquiry into pedagogical approaches. So to introduce my topic, this is an auto-inquiry where I am talking about my experiences as a researcher who have gone through 3 different cultural contexts in my education journey. In the beginning, I was just a student who didn't like going to classes. I was very young. Then I developed the habit of loving the subjects, especially languages. I love language, especially English. I was so astonished by one of my teacher in my 8th grade. She was so fluent. She was so, I don't have words to explain how polite and the I don't know how to explain her demure. She was so into teaching the language in a sense that it made me feel like, oh, I want to do it too. And that's how I started to dream about being an English professor. And through that, I have led to this where I went to deeper into my experience as a student, where in my undergrad, where I did my bachelor's, I realized that education in general needs to be more fun and entertaining, because students kind of get very bored of it as soon as the 20 minutes pass. So as a teacher, it was really difficult to gather all the attention. So in my study, I have realized that an educational approach that prioritizes the comprehension and respect of cultural disparities, encourages efficient communication and interaction between different cultural groups, and cultivates a deep appreciation for cultural diversity in various contexts. This is the main theme work that I went through, in the sense that I wanted to see how these three contexts help me prove myself as a better person and as a person who can communicate efficiently. In my undergrad, I was very underconfident in language proficiency, because I was not in a context where I can continuously speak in the language. In my state, usually we speak in Malayalam, which is our mother tongue, and we continuously code switch. It's like we switch from one language to another without even thinking that is happening. So most of the words that is in English is being used by Malayalis continuously. So we don't even know what's the word for it in Malayalam. So these keep on happening, and the cultural context in Kerala was so different that I rarely had an opportunity to use the language. Even when I was using the language, people were not supportive of it, because we clearly loved our language more and it is more easier to communicate. And whenever I tried to be more proficient, people used to mock me and say that, oh, now you have an accent and now you have to be like this to prove yourself. You can't use your mother tongue efficiently or what. So this kind of created a kind of a stigma in me, that I felt that, oh, maybe I'm not really good at it, and I shut myself. And to be very honest, my undergrad was confusing, because I didn't like the way the classes were. It were completely didactic, and it was rhetoric, in the sense that people were continuously coming to classes after an hour, and they keep on talking about the same thing, like different subject but the same thing. Like, you know, when you are a student and you sit in a class from 8:30 to 4:30, you just listen to so many things and you don't grasp a lot of ideas or thoughts. And it was a class of 50 or 60 people, so there were less interactions, and there were set of people who really were confident in speaking. So people like me who were starting to get that into their system couldn't perform well. And I noticed that there was not much of activity based learning there. It was completely structured banked method, fairy, where the education is just pursued in the sense that the student will be just sitting there absorbing the knowledge, but he or she doesn't know what's actually, like, you know, happening, or doesn't. It's just an exam based method of learning. You study, you write the exam, you get the grade, and you pass. Other than that, there is no language proficiency, there is no interaction between the students in the same language, or anything that can create a difference in one particular student. It's just a collective learning of maybe prose or poetry or anything sort of that. And through this research and the theoretical framework by Clavin and Conley, it says about the communication competency, which I actually drew a lot of references from my life. So it helped me, this auto-narrative inquiry helped me to go deeper and find rich resources that can help the future students to be more confident. And also I have to mention cross-national comparative research, according to Hatteras and Meakin, compares particular phenomena between nations in order to gather information and draw generalizations about social concerns. So when I went into this research, there were few things that I had to be very particular about. The cultural context, the language competency, the methodologies, the pedagogies that I have to use in a way to create a maybe a finding that can help others too. I also have to mention intercultural competency as the appropriate and effective management of interaction between people who to some degree or another represent different or divergent affective cognitive behavior orientations to the world. So mostly we have to have different people in a set classroom to have this divergent theory to come into practice. But in a country like India or like a state like Kerala, mostly the students are from the same state and you all speak the same language, so it's quite hard to implement several things, but using the methods that I'm going to say in the future, it will help the students to be better at it. So my thesis statement is this research project uses auto-narrative inquiry to examine and compare how pedagogical approaches in India and Canada foster students' communication competency through cross-cultural education with the goal of identifying effective techniques for improving intercultural communication skills in a diverse educational setting. So these were the research context. I had 3 transitions in my life. The first was in Kerala, where I followed a typical banking method of education, and it is stated by Ferry too. And the next shift was in Bangalore, India, where I had much more participatory learning. I had more time to invest in the language practice, and it also helped me to be better at communication. And in Canada, the narrative approach and activity-based learning was the most important approach that really made me better. And also I should mention critical thinking. That was something that I was not used to back I was in India. It was completely exams, and now I have to think about, oh, okay, what do I think about this? And it's a quite liberating feeling because I can now feel a lot of things, and these things can be a part of a research or it can be a part of my assignment, which makes me feel more confident actually. And these were the key challenges that affected me in the past, which were the confidence part, the gap between the language, like my home language, and the English language, which is my second language, and the limited opportunities to use the language in several contexts. And these are the statement of problem. So globalization and internationalization has been a part of our education system for a while now, most probably a decade or so. And a lot of times we don't feel it is there, but it's actually very prominent because the internationalization happens mostly when students commute from one place, and the student mobility feels a very huge responsibility in a student's life. Like you have to move from one country to another to experience a lot of other things, and you have to comprehend everything to like go to your profession. So in this research, I also found that the pedagogical approaches used by certain professors can bring out better changes to the students. And there is also the educational system. Like if you change the system and put the student in different particular systems, the student will show different type of language proficiency. So that is something that I found. And these are the research questions. How do can practical practices in India and Canada differ in their impact on students' communication skills, and what can be learned from these cross-cultural educational experiences? How can professional development programs for educators can be developed efficiently to incorporate cross-cultural perspectives and universal design of learning concepts to promote students' communication competence? So in the literature review, I have addressed a lot of topics related to the research. The first one is internationalization and hyper-internationalization. So as I talked about it earlier, internationalization has been happening in most of the countries, and students were moving from one country to another to get education, to find job opportunities, and it has been a part in our education system for a decade, and kind of the early phase, and I think Canada is in its early phase to incorporate hyper internationalization, in the sense that we are trying to incorporate online methods and online learning to our curriculum so that we can reach a broader spectrum of students, and it helps to actually create a better, I think it's a medium to connect both students if they are in a different country, but it just creates I think a sense of acceptance in students if they can do internationalization, like they can move to another place and be accepted in that country. That makes them feel much better. Even I feel it and it complements the next points like cultural shock, acculturation and racism. When you come to a country, you are just scared, and I think most of you know, like, the orientation is happening. So I was a volunteer last time, and I could see how students were feeling when I was meeting them. They were continuously mostly feeling culture shock, because so many things that we are used to in our home country is not being practiced here in Canada. So you have to change your ways to adapt to the culture. Even the language, some of the students feel it very difficult to adapt to the language, but it's quite exciting to see the shift when the students who came last semester with me, they were quite very, I think they were so scared to use the language in the beginning. Now I can see the change. So I think having in a different context itself creates the ability to communicate better. And there are especially language barriers that happens in one's life, but I think through this mobility, we can create such psychological and cultural transformation to students by constant interaction with multiple people, and it creates a sense of understanding, in the sense you can see how you are culturally very different from others, and we can live in a same place without causing any trouble to anybody. So that was something that I wanted to focus on. And going to the inclusive cultural models, I have mentioned 4 points, that is constructivism, multiculturalism in class, responsive pedagogy, UDL and inclusive design. These were few methods that I have found, like it's kind of models in education that helps to relate the ideas of education with inclusive and adaptable methodology. So constructivism emphasizes learners' active role in building a knowledge by drawing previous experiences and cultural context, and it helps, and it kind of is a gradual growth, and it's like developing your own knowledge in your own pace. And in multiculturalism, as we all know, in a classroom like this, in Canadian context, it is easier for us to have more conversations and have that pathway to discuss our differences and our similarities. So that's one thing that can be used. And culturally responsive pedagogy is an educational strategy that acknowledges and incorporates students' various cultural backgrounds into teaching techniques. So through this, Gloria first mentioned this in 1990, and she quite said in this way, like, the students from different cultural backgrounds will effectively express themselves and engage in cross-cultural communication only if they're given a chance to communicate. So I think that makes a lot of sense in this research too. Like, I have been traveling from one place to another to have my proficiency, so I'm glad that I did it. And finally, the UDL inclusive design, which helps to create a universally adaptable and very easy method to follow actually. Like, it will help you to make the assessments better. Like, you can give different models of assessment to the students. Like, if I want to make a video as an assignment, that can be done in UDL, and it will help the student to be more expressive in her ways. And the theoretical framework, actually I have 3 of them. I have combined these 3. It's Socioculture Theory by Wordsky, Critical Pedagogy by Ferry, and Universal Design of Learning Framework. So through this framework, I was asked this question like, why 3 frameworks? So I just want to say that through social cultural theory, we know how socially the interaction with the language changes the student. So that's the basic theory that I have used. And later on, I just combined it with critical pedagogy, where the critical thinking is also important in a student's life to bring out the social cultural theory in them. Or else if they have no critical thinking, they will not be able to socially interact with students. And the last one is UDL, because that's one of the proposed ideology, like methodology that I'll be suggesting in the findings. So it also concludes in a way that it will help you to promote interculture competency. Even it helps to create more strategies and pedagogical methods that can improve the language competency much better. And the methodology I've used, as I mentioned, is an auto-narrative inquiry, where I actually have a chapter where I wrote my story, and I have clearly mentioned few instances that clearly impacted my educational journey. And it's the auto-narrative inquiry, if you don't know, it helps the researcher to reflect on your experiences and generate rich contextualized data, which would help to create a unique insight and give more emphasis in scenarios, like to give more clarity to the challenging situations. And moving forward, this is going to be my narrative. So, reflection on my bachelor's. Do you mind if I read a few lines from? Okay. I'll just read the first paragraph from every chapter so that you know what type of a narration I have used. So the narrative. Turning 18, I moved to Kochi to finish my undergrad degree in 2015. Living away from home was a start for me, and the change was difficult. Sharing a room with 5 females at a girls' hostel, I was trying to negotiate this new phase of my life. Renowned for its rigorous policies and high standards, the university was also a challenging environment to navigate. Enrolling in an integrated MA program, a course combining BA and MA, should help me grow as a language learner and proceed towards my aim as being an English professor. The truth turned out differently than what I have envisioned. The strict learning environment with its focus on regulations did not really inspire language acquisition. The classes were frequently didactic, only some spoke up and others were reluctant to speak up out of concern about making mistakes. Many of my classmates who probably battled the same fears or not were not especially encouraging. I struggled to make my way out from behind my shell. So this reflects on how the didactic learning clearly didn't give me an opportunity to speak up. I was mostly sleeping. I have mentioned it here too. I was just mostly sleeping because the classes were from 8:30 to 4:30, and the professors just keep on coming one after one, and they will talk about a prose for an hour, or they will just dictate the notes for an hour. So it was quite boring, and we couldn't use our mobile phones. So you just be in the class, the university, from 8:30 to 4:30, and especially if you are a girl, you cannot even get out of the university. You have to wait till 4:30 in the university without doing nothing. You don't have any access. So that quite made me depressed in that phase. But I moved out of it. Now I'm fine. And yes. The reflection on my masters. Walking off the train in Bangalore, I was engulfed by the vibrant city. As I started this new phase of my life, the breast was charged with both exhilaration and nervousness. The tranquil streets of Kerala, which I had left behind, was a stark contrast to the towering sky covers and constant bustle of traffic here. In 2018, dreaming and carrying my college bag, I headed towards the university campus where I would be studying for 2 years. The first several days were flurry of fresh faces, pouring dialects, and a tsunami of information. I was surrounded by students from every corner of India, a melting pot of cultures. The variety was both thrilling and terrifying. During my first lesson, I engaged in small conversations and actively observed the lively discussions. Professor Sumati, my literature professor, was a charismatic woman with a pleasant smile, inspiring everyone to participate in these lively discussions. I felt my heart rush as she called on me, but I managed to put up together a coherent reply. My classmates nodded in accord, and the professor's eyes sparkled with approval, which surprised me. So, in this reflection, I really want to talk about my professor Sumati. She was one of the professors who clearly told me like, oh Athira, you have a lot of potential in you and you are just not speaking up because you are scared of being in front of people maybe, or you are not confident in your language, but you have to continue to try. And in every class she'll come up with some content where we have to have active discussions. We have to come into the front of the class, give presentations or give your own perceptions about some poetry, which made me clearly be a better person or a better communicator. Also, there was a chance that was given to me, which I mentioned in this, where I had to participate in a jam competition, just a minute, where I had to continuously speak for a minute, and it was nerve-wracking, but I am glad that I tried it out. At that point, I was not very confident in my language, but now when I look back, I see myself doing a lot of things, even though I was not confident. So for the future, I think students, I have to say that being confident is the key to the success. And the final reflection is the one where I am here in TRU. On April 19, 2023, I arrived in Canada. The air was crisp and carried a fresh beginning. Though I couldn't exactly know why, I had dreamed of living in Canada since I was a teenager. Maybe it was the tales I heard, the pictures of vast landscapes, or the concept of place where possibilities bloom. My need for a change grew stronger after the pandemic occurred, and I started looking for opportunities outside India. Getting my acceptance letter from Masters in Education at a Canadian university was a triumph, a validation of my dreams and hopes. The university experience was unlike anything I have ever known. The class structures were somewhat creatively flexible. The strict timetables and strain of continuous testing were long gone. Rather, I discovered that we could really interact with topics, talk about ideas, engage in activities meant to challenge our critical thinking in 3-hour lectures. This change startled and delighted me at the same time. In India, education has been a straight road of memorization and repetition. Here we were asked to investigate, probe and mediate. I realized as I navigated this new academic terrain that group projects and conversation form the core of learning experience. So in a Canadian context, you can see the picture. This is us mostly in the class. We have to do a presentation or we have to actively talk in a class. And it was actually a very liberating feeling in the sense that students from different, you can see, she's Sunny, she is from China, she is from Nigeria, and there are other classmates, and this is Dr. Edward Howe. So in this classroom, we were continuously talking about something or another. And in this picture, if you can see, this is Kerala, and I'm explaining my cultural festival to them. So it's always culturally involved. You keep on talking about yourself, your culture, your nationality, your race, everything. So you keep on reflecting on yourself more than you have ever done in your life, and it creates a sense of belonging. Like, I think I am more Indian now than I was in India. Like, I feel very proud to be an Indian after I came to Canada. I'm like, okay, this is new. But when I was in India, I was like, oh, it's just a daily life. I'm living here. But now I see the differences in minute things too, like the food, the music, the culture, the way people behave. Everything is so different that I can literally accept it now and be okay living with these differences. That's something that I clearly felt happy about. There were so many instances where we were like perplexed, like, you know, what's happened, because the way I'm speaking, the other person couldn't even understand or like couldn't even revive what I was trying to say. But we moved on from it, and it just made me realize, yes, this is a wonderful opportunity, and it clearly made me more critically or maybe in language wise also very confident, and I thank theory for that. And these are the findings. The significant contrast between traditional and progressive educational approaches. Interactive student-centered strategies enhance engagement and learning outcomes. Conventional settings often led to lower engagement and confidence. Discussion is about the importance of creating inclusive and engaging learning environments. Critical role on educators in shaping students' experiences. Value of cultural diversity and experiential learning in education. And for professional development, I think even in India, professional development is given importance, but I think in Canada it's more prevalent. Like teachers or professors are given more training, continuous training to be better at the curriculum and give more methodologies or strategies to implement an inclusive classroom to the students. And there were lot of barriers, not lot, like few barriers in the sense that lack of time and resources. That was something that professors and teachers doesn't have. They have to continuously work, teach, do markings. So everything was just continuous circle. Mismatch between content and individual needs, low motivation and engagement. There are a few promising approaches to that: collaborative learning communities, technology enhanced professional development, personalized and context appropriate programs. There are recommendations to involve teachers in planning and selection, support from school leaders, creating trust environments for collaboration, provide assistance with digital platforms, and suggestions for pedagogical methods. So I have separated it for three people, like for educators, policymakers, and students. For educators, interactive and discussion-based learning, technology enhanced communication, role-playing and stimulations, peer review and evaluation. For policymakers, curricular integration, professional development for teachers, assessment reform. For students, setting goals and reflection, extracurricular activities, practicing cross-cultural communication. So tools of implementation, educators can use these pedagogical approaches to create much inclusive classrooms, learning management with close materials and facilitate online interactions. Maybe use of PPTs or virtual teamwork through video conferences, maybe interactive whiteboards with digital annotations, online forms for formative evaluations, mind mapping and visual brainstorming. Students can work on digital portfolios, and even group projects and peer review activities can create much better language competency. Purpose in current education, emphasizing in the development of practical skills with academic knowledge. Mostly, the purpose is to bring out the more inclusive classrooms rather than the exam-oriented one, because the exam-oriented one just gives you a classroom with students who just know the theories, which is actually not here in Canada, and I really want that to be implemented too, in the sense that if you can combine theories with the communication competency or the inclusive learning, it can create much better comprehension for the students. Because most of the time what I have seen in India is that students are completely aware about the theories but they don't know the other aspects of it. But here students will be critically thinking, they will be okay with communication, but when you ask them about a certain theory, they will be like, oh, I don't know, or I don't know who proposed it. So maybe incorporating theories in Canadian education can be a change, and vice versa. Yes. I was just trying to figure it out how to end this in 20. Thank you so much for being patient.
Thank you so much. I love hearing your story, especially after having read the paper, which was very theoretical and I was very steeped in the terms and the definitions. But what I was craving was your story, and you gave us that today. So thank you so much for that. Some of the things I noticed as you were talking that I didn't notice so much in the paper was the emphasis on appreciative learning. Talk about that one teacher. I was like, you can do it. Why are you talking? You have so much knowledge in your brain. And she made learning fun and inspired you and motivated you to study language. And then you spoke about being in the classroom with Dr. Edward Howe and how you were doing an assignment on your own culture and how it gave you confidence about who you were. You become more familiar with who you are and confident in that. And I sort of was thinking about that in the context of some of your early conversations where you were facing stigma, accent, and practicing the language. You weren't motivated because you were nervous to speak, or maybe you were feeling as though you didn't belong. And so there are sort of these different changes. I don't know if you can speak to maybe what is the role of the teacher? Like, how can one teacher sort of influence a student to make them or to help them with their confidence so they'll try outside their comfort zone? So what do you think, if you were in a classroom, what might you do with a student who didn't have confidence?
I think I have not mentioned it in the project at all, that I used to work as an assistant professor in India. So I had students, like 70 students in my classroom, and it's in Bangalore where I did my master's. So there was a reflective session where you can talk to the students, but there are 70 of them, and it's just very, they are just so vibrant and energetic. You as a small person, when you stand there, they don't care about you. But as a teacher, I think there were certain students that I remember who came up to me in the classroom, after the classroom, or to the staff room saying that, "Hi ma'am, I don't know what to do about it, can you help me?" So I think being kind and nice to the students is the first thing that you have to do as a teacher, because if you can't be kind to a student, the student doesn't feel connected to you. The way you speak, the way you control your modulations in the language, that will help the student be comfortable with you. And when they get comfortable, you can actually make changes in their life. If you say, okay, you should start speaking for 10 minutes every day, and if you say it in a way that they feel it, they will do it. That's what I did too. Like when my professor, she was like, "Oh, you can do it, just say it." And I'm like, okay, maybe I can try. The constant maybe encouragement in classrooms where you ask the question, and if the person is be like, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it," you give them a positive, like, okay, maybe you don't want to talk about this, but maybe next question you might know something, so be prepared, you have to talk about that. So just keep on encouraging them, be nice to them. I think that's the basic of being a teacher. I think after that, all the pedagogies is just a supplement. First, the professor or teacher should be very kind.
I think that's beautiful. I mean, that's very much that care-based approach. When people
Yes.
feel like you care about them,
Yeah.
they're more willing to give of themselves.
Yeah,
Short questions for you, just more technical questions. And well done again on the presentation and on the work. So you've used auto-inquiry, which can be both simple and complex. Because simple because it's a story, complex because then we have to analyze a story.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your conclusions as you finish this process? How would you describe it to other peers or colleagues that might be thinking about using that process?
For me, I think it is one of the method that I really enjoy doing, in the sense that I'm a more qualitative person. I can write. So when Alana told me like, "Oh, I like your narrative," I was so happy that, okay, maybe apart from theories, I can revise some stories and incorporate it into the educational context and create a pedagogy or like methods that can really help students or teachers or policymakers to make a change. So I would really recommend auto inquiry if you have qualitative methodology like aspects of that in you, or else it will be difficult because then you have to think about your stories, then you have to write it in a way that it complements the research. If your narrative doesn't flow with the content, it doesn't make sense. So yeah, if you are good at writing, auto-narrative inquiry is the best research because it doesn't have any quantitative methods or mind-boggling numericals. So it's just an easy approach, but you can have backlash about the how it will be important for the next generation or something like that.
That's my second question. So you chose an alternative inquiry, but the project has the aim of providing recommendations for others. So how would you address a critique that would say, well, you're providing recommendations for others, but it's based on the single narrative? So how would you address that?
Through auto inquiry, you can only do one study. So if somebody asks me the question, it's very simple that I did it on my experiences. It can vary to different people, but I have derived or I have chosen stories in the sense that it clearly states how the context, the culture has influenced me as a student, and this is quite similar to every other student in this context. So I think I can explain it in a sense that, oh, maybe the entire idea is complex, but it's kind of flows to a way that I don't know how to. It's just, I think the recommendations that I have provided is more generalized than just from my narrative. I have seen a lot of students or classmates or peers being in the same situation, so I have seen how they have improved. So I think the recommendations are generalized more than just an auto inquiry.
Yeah, it probably is a matter of people's thoughts echoing with you, right?
Yeah.
Rather than you saying this applies to
Yeah.
you, but inviting
I'm
people
never
into
saying that
place.
it's just me and I just stick by it. I'm just saying in the sense that it's a generalized context, like a cultural context. So it's quite the similar way how my mom is teaching, my like aunties are teaching, or my friends are teaching. So it's just the same context with my experiences. So yeah.
My third question is very short, but you drew a lot of influences from the transitions that you made from one city to another and eventually to Canada. But you don't discuss the transitions from undergrad to graduate. Do you think that had something to do with it too? That maybe we don't teach in the same way
Mm-hmm.
in undergraduate courses and in graduate courses?
Yeah. For me, I think I can only talk about my experiences. That's why I was constantly focusing on undergrad, grad, Masters of Arts and Masters of Education. So in this journey, if I take a student who is in Canada doing undergrad, his or her experience can be quite different from what I am going through, because I have friends who are doing undergrad and they have exams, they have theories to learn, they have lab classes, and it's quite different from how chill environment we have in our Masters of Education. We are more flexible, we just have 3 years of classes, we have 1 assignment a week, we have few people in class, we usually do sharing circles and we share our stories and narratives. So the experience I have as a grad learner here is very different from than undergrad. So I would suggest to an undergrad student to do the same auto narrative inquiry and complement to my research.
That's it from my end.
Yeah. So I have one that maybe a little bit tricky. When we think about multiculturalism and culture responsive pedagogy, there are some challenges associated, right? If you're with a group that might be more homogenous, or you have a particularly dominant group within a class, and some groups that are minoritized or racialized, when we're talking about presenting all viewpoints in that class, some of those viewpoints might be discriminatory or exclusionary, and not all learners are open-minded to different viewpoints. So as a teacher coming into a class that's quite diverse, how might you approach encouraging that open-minded perspective, or responding to students who might feel as though the comments of their peers are actually quite hurtful or harmful? I mean, this is quite a difficult one, but as educators, it's important that we are prepared for those instances in which something might come up and a student could be harmed by their peers. So how might you do that as a teacher in the classroom?
So if I can talk about TRU and Masters of Education, I would say I had a wonderful peers because they were very open-minded. They never had issues with any other people, like perspectives or ideologies. And mostly I think it's because of the sharing circle. We usually kind of incorporated sharing circle in most of the classes, where when you share something in a sharing circle, it stays in the circle. So you first introduce the concept and you say that whatever you want to say, it will stay inside. You are not being judged, you are not being poked or asked for several other questions after this class.
And the other thing is, if you want to stay silent, you can stay silent in the sharing circle. So I think I would introduce a sharing circle in my classrooms with diverse group, because that will help me organize the class better, in the sense when they speak one by one, I can first see how they are in their context, like cultural context or in their language, where they stand and how much they stand on it. So if they are very particular about their culture, then I have to be a little bit looser. Like I have to show that I am okay with your rigidness in that concept, and gradually have to, like, make them come out of their bubble and rigidness and open up to everybody. And I think mostly if you give people a chance to talk, I think they will be more attentive, and as listeners, it's more, I think in that sharing circle, when you sit and listen, you grasp a lot of emotions. So I think I would do that, and if anybody has a problem, I'll be like, you don't mind, like, I don't mind, you can just stay silent, or if you don't agree with her, don't take it on her, because it's just her ideology and we support you and her, so it's all fine, chill, just drink some water. I think I'll be pretty chill.
I think the sharing circle is definitely a good strategy. The more students have the opportunity to share their stories without, the sharing circle is nice because it's not one of those back and forth.
Yeah.
You get to share your story with no one sort of commenting or reacting, and it doesn't challenge in that way. So I totally agree that a sharing circle is a good strategy. I think some of the things you might want to consider, exposure to different ideas through the curriculum.
Yeah.
Because often the students' stories is definitely one way, but having different different people presented different theories, different ideas, different scholars than often what we might see in a Western educational system. There's these scholars, Senso and D'Angelo, they argue that actually it shouldn't be an equal representation of voices. And I don't know how you feel about this. You don't have to have a yes or no, and I still wrestle with this too, but rather because, especially in Canada, a particular viewpoint is emphasized, and so Senso and D'Angelo argue that in the classroom we should uplift or amplify those voices that don't get as much airtime outside of the classroom. So that's an interesting way to think about it, because it wouldn't necessarily be equality in opinions, but rather uplifting more. So
it's just what just giving everybody equal chances, not just saying, if you take a class, I have seen, like, everybody has privileges and underprivileges. So when you clearly know where you stand, it will give you more opportunity to humble yourself and be, like, okay with accepting. There were several ideas, even when my classmates were discussing some points related to diversity. There were some points proposed by my Indian, like, peers, which was so different from what I have known, because I'm from a different state. So even when I had some, like, the conflict, I just be nice to them, like, okay, hi, I agree to whatever you said, it maybe happens in your state, but in our state it's different. So just don't generalize India as just a country. It's 27 states, 27 different, like, cultures, so it's gonna be different. So just adapt to it, adjust to it, live in unity and diversity. That's the only thing we can do. Thank you. Oh, Samto.
Yeah. So mine is, it's very important that during presentations, the reason we have projects is so people can use it in their daily lives, right? So my question would be, despite feeling better overall now, how do you handle situations like that would have made you feel uncomfortable in the past?
Oh, I can actually use you for this. So when we started our GCS, we were classmates and we were assigned for one class project, like assignment, and we have 2 people from Nigeria, 2 people from China, and I was the only Indian. So I was trying to communicate with Somto, and whatever I say or whatever she said, we couldn't understand anything. We were like, what? Continuously asking what? And at one point she got so angry. She was like, why are you saying that? No, you do not understand. Then I had to make her sit and say, like, listen, your accent is different, my accent is different, we can work on it and we can be, friends. And we proved it, right? Now we are friends, we can talk without even having a conflict or any problem. Like now I can clearly understand her like accent much better when I first met her. So yeah, communication is the key.
So, excellent presentation. I really love the idea about how you have presented your story. It's really inspiring. I wanted to ask you, when you were doing this project, like, of course, there were many reflections, there were many phases which you were remembering, many stories which you were remembering while you were writing. So, was there any incidents which you really wanted to write but you did not write because of certain, restrictions or of the project, would you like to share that? And also, how did it help you grow as a person? Like, when after you finished, you have written everything. How do you see yourself when you have written it? I want to know how it helped you to grow as a person.
Thank you, Ruby. So the first question is who or what I have missed writing in the paper. So I have this one professor, her name is Dr. Chamundeshwari. She was my guide and my professor back in my Masters of Arts. And she was the one who created this interest in research. Like I was introduced to it when I was in my undergrad, but she was the continuous force that she comes to class, she gives a lecture and she like, in this concept, there are 10 researchers. Do you even know that? I'm like, no. Then we keep on having conversations and she's like, she gives assignments in research paper format. She's like, you have to make maybe 5 research papers in one semester. So you keep on writing research papers, and she actually published one of my research papers in Scopus Journal. So I was so thankful to her that she took my class assignment, modified it and made it into a paper. So I think that story I wanted to incorporate, but it doesn't come with the language competency, so I have to leave her. I felt so bad not including her and including all other professors, but yeah, that's the one story. And after the research project, I think I am more aware about myself as a person. Before this research, I knew I have gone through all this, but deeply analyzing every experience that I've went through, the educational pedagogies or the classroom settings I have gone through, I have become more aware that what I should not be as a professor in my future. So I think that's the best gain from this. Thank you.
Do you have more? I've got 3 more. These are quite complex. I'm not expecting a clear answer, but just to get you thinking of further work, maybe a further reflection, you can. So you talk about the hyper-internationalization of education, and in the literature you talk about racism and acculturation and all that, but then you describe a journey which is very pleasant. And so I just wanted to take you back to that and think, is there anything that maybe you failed to talk about in terms of how hyper-internationalization can be, yes, it opens these doors, but
yeah.
Does it open the negative experiences as well?
I would say, as a person who migrates from one country, you have to have that set mindset that nobody is going to be your friend, and you are alone in this new country, fighting for your journey, and being accepted or not accepted is something that can vary on the people you meet. So if you, for me, I have had some cultural shocks, like. I have never been like, hi, good morning, how are you? I was not that. But now I frequently do it with people, and I don't know if I go back to India and I say, hi, how are you? They'll be like, are you crazy? Because we don't do that. So that was one of the cultural shock that I had. Then also people being so sweet. Even though there are internalized racism in the same cultural groups, there are people who culturally discriminate. If I talk about India, India has states, right? So every state has different culture, language, cultural, festivals and everything. So some of them will be dominant in a classroom and some of us will not be. So we have to be, okay with it, and whatever they are trying to, sometimes they try to drag you down because you are in the same culture, but they don't do the same thing to the other classmates. So I have faced that, and I just moved out of it in the sense that if they don't support me, they doesn't matter at that level who supports me. So I always be like, okay, maybe your point of view is that, and you want me to be certain way, which I really can't do. So I'll just take a step back and let you be in your space. And racism, I never felt it in a promising way, but I have had like little microaggressions in the sense that, oh, Indian girl, something like that, oh, you're brown girl, something like that. I've had instances where people constantly call out things that is something that I cannot change. So that's the same thing, I can't do anything. So compared to other students, my experience was pleasant in Canada, so I couldn't write a lot on that aspect. But if in the future, if I experience something that strikes me, I will definitely put that into writing.
And how would you address someone's critique if someone said to you that there are times where maybe you are offering a sort of polarized view of a West where we do so much active learning and a home country where there's less of that? Do you think there might be pockets in Canada where there is very much a didactic, top-down environment just like this? Right?
Yeah, that's why my reflection says that it's of my Masters of Education. So if anybody who goes to the Masters of Education, it's more of an inclusive and more of a very small, very not structured classroom area. But if I talk about an undergrad situation here, I think it's didactic. It's more theory based and you have to continuously learn and write examinations. So if somebody asks me something, I can say that this is just my Masters of Education. So you can check how it is, and if you find it aligned to Masters of Education, that makes sense. But if you compare it with an undergrad, I don't think it will make sense. So it's different in a Canadian context where if you are in undergrad, grad or PhD, everything, it's going to be different.
And finally, you make recommendations. How would you, this one is tough, how would you address a critique that would say that if you use those recommendations, they might be seen as culturally biased, for example, back in India? So for example, there's a lot of literature now around some of the inclusion practices that are from the West and imposed on India, and then an Indian pushback to say, well, this doesn't work in our context, and we don't have this, and we have large classrooms. So how would you address this possibility that you are locking yourself almost in a sort of post-colonial process by giving recommendations that might work for an environment but not work for another?
Yeah, so if somebody asks me this question, I would always say that India had a Gurukul system where the students go to the teacher and stay at their house, learn and come back after years to their own house. So after I think Macaulay's minutes in the colonization period of time, they called Indians' education system very not useful, and they called Indians savages. But when we invented zero and we had a lot of learnings already in the culture, like we had Ayurveda, we had a lot of things. So when I talk about post-colonialism and my research, I think I belong to the post-colonial period where Macaulay's minutes continuously follows in the education system. The banking model still exists. Teachers are really didactic, and even though there are activities, there are a lot of population. So every classroom, if it's not a high-paid school, you will have, I had 90 classmates from 5th grade to 10th grade, 90 girls in one classroom, and one teacher dealing with us 90 girls. And we are all teenagers. So our teachers had a good handful of experiences. So I can only say that, even in the school, the same thing, like just because of the number of people in the class, there is less attention to the students. Some will be sleeping, some will be crying because of her periods, or somebody will be like, oh, I like this guy. There might be 10,000 topics in a classroom, and the teacher will be just standing there and dictating the story or teaching some mathematical formula, which 50% of the students doesn't care. We will just go to tuition classes and we will learn the same thing there, pay extra and get tuitions and we pass. school is just to get the certificate. That's how in a state school it is. But I think it's gradually changing because I graduated in 2010-12 from my school. So it's been a long time, more than a decade. So I think some things might have changed. But it's still like my mom is still a teacher. So she just teaches like a normal teacher. So I think there is like maybe a 25% change from what I've had, but it's still the same. Like even if you change the methodology, parents will not like it. Parents want you to just to teach and go. They don't care about what you are thinking. They just want A+. That's the problem in Indian education system.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if there's any more questions from the audience. No? Okay, it's a wrap then.